Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 4, Text 16. Chapter name: Sati quits her body. Kim va sivakyam asivam na vidustvadanye. Brahmadayastam avikirya jatas samsmane. Tanmalaya bhasma nirkapali avasat pisachair. Ye murdhabir dadati taccharanavasishtatam. Kim va sivakyam asivam na vidustvadanye. Brahmadayastam avikirya jatasmasane. Tanmalya bhasma nrikupali avasat pisacher. Ye murdhabir dadati taccharanavashrishtatam. Kim va sivakyam asivam na vidustvadanye. Brahmadayastam avakirya jatasmasane. Tanmalya bhasma nikripali avasat pisacher. Ye murdhabir dadati taccharanavasrishtam. Kim va shivakyam asivam na vidustvadanye. Brahmavadasam savikirya jatasmasane. Tanmalya bhasma rikupali avasat pisacher. Ye murdhabir dadati taccharanavasishtam. Kim va shivakyam avasim na vidustvadanye. Brahmadayastam avakirya jatasmasane. Tanmalya bhasma nrikupali avasat pisacher. Ye murdhabir dadati taccharanavasishtam. Kim va sivakyam asitam na vidustvadanye. Brahmadayastam avakirya jatasmasane. Tanmalya bhasma nrikupali avasat pisacher. Ye murdhabir dadati taccharanavasrishtam. Matajis. vidustava Brahmadayastam avakirya jata samsmashane Tanmalya basma rikupali avasat pisacher Ye murdhabi dadati chatcharanavrasustam. Word to word meaning. Kimva, whether. Shiva Akyam, named Shiva. Ashivam, inauspicious. Na viduha, do not know. Tvat anye, other than you. Brahma Adayaha, Brahma and others. Tam, him, Lord Shiva. Avakirya, scattered. Jataha, having twisted hair. Smashane, in the crematorium. Tat Malya Basma Nrikrupali, who is garlanded with human skulls and smeared with ashes. Avasat, associated. Pishachaiha, with demons. Ye, who. Murdhabiha, with the head. Dadati, place. Tat Charana Avrishishtam, fallen from his lotus feet. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Do you think that greater, more respectable personalities than you, such as Lord Brahma, do not know this inauspicious person who goes under the name Lord Shiva? He associates with the demons in the crematorium. His locks of hair are scattered all over his body. He is garlanded with human skulls and smeared with ashes from the crematorium. But in spite of all these inauspicious qualities, great personalities like Brahma honor him by accepting flowers offered to his lotus feet and placing them with great respect on their heads. Purport. It is useless to condemn a great personality like Lord Shiva, and this is being stated by his wife Sati to establish the supremacy of her husband. First she said, "You call Lord Shiva inauspicious because he associates with demons in crematoriums, covers his body with ashes of the dead, and garlands himself with skulls of human beings. You have shown so many defects, but you do not know that his position is always transcendental. Although he appears inauspicious, why do personalities like Brahma respect the dust of his lotus feet and place on their heads with great respect those very garlands which are condemned by you? Since Sati was a chaste woman and the wife of Lord Shiva, it was her duty to establish the elevated position of Lord Shiva, not only by sentiment, but by facts. Lord Shiva is not an ordinary living entity. This is the conclusion of Vedic scripture. He is neither on the level of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, nor on the level of ordinary living entities. Brahma is in almost all cases an ordinary living entity. Sometimes there is no ordinary living entity available. The post of Brahma is occupied by expansion of Lord Vishnu. But generally this post is occupied by a great pious living entity within this universe. Thus Lord Shiva's position is constitutionally higher than that of Lord Brahma, although Lord Shiva appeared as the son of Brahma. Here it is mentioned that even personalities like Brahma accept the so-called inauspicious flowers and the dust of lotus feet of Lord Shiva. Great sages like Marichi, Atri, Bhrigu and others among the 9 great sages who are descendants of Brahma also respect Lord Shiva in such a way because they all know that Lord Shiva is not an ordinary living entity. In many Puranas, it is sometimes asserted that a demigod is elevated to such a high position that he is almost on an equal level with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the conclusion that Lord Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead is confirmed in every scripture. Lord Shiva is described in Brahma Samhita to be like curd or yogurt. Curd is not different from milk. Since milk is transformed into curd, in one sense curd is also milk. Similarly, Lord Shiva is in one sense the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but in another sense he is not. Just as curd is milk, although we have to distinguish between the two. These descriptions are in the Vedic literature. When we find that a demigod occupies a position apparently more elevated than that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is just to draw devotees' attention to that particular demigod. It is also stated that in Bhagavad Gita 9.25 that if one wants to worship a particular demigod, the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is sitting in everyone's heart gives one greater and greater attachment for that demigod so that one may be elevated to that demigod's abode. Yanti Deva Vrata Devan. By worshipping demigods, one can elevate himself to the abodes of demigods. Similarly, by worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can be elevated to the spiritual kingdom. This is stated in different places in Vedic literature. Here Lord Shiva is praised by Sati, partially due to her personal respect for Lord Shiva, since he is her husband, and partially due to his exalted position, which exceeds that of ordinary living entities, even Brahma. The position of Lord Shiva is accepted by Lord Brahma, so Daksha, Sati's father, should also recognize him. That was the point of Sati's statement. She did not actually come to her father's house to participate in the function, although before coming she pleaded with her husband that she wanted to see her sisters and her mother. That was a plea only, for actually at heart she maintained the idea that she should convince her father, Daksha, that it was useless to continue being envious of Lord Shiva. That was her main purpose. When she was unable to convince her father, she gave up her body he had given her, as will be seen in the following verses. Om Ajnanatimmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So welcome everybody to today's Srimad Bhagavatam class. So as we have been seeing in the last couple of verses, Sati is trying to establish Lord Shiva's exalted position to her father Daksha. So what we can see here is Sati is presenting the position of Shiva. She is making an attempt for Daksha to understand and give up his envy and lust towards Shiva. So if you see, Shiva is not a good looking personality. He is having a garland of skulls, body full of ashes. He lives in the crematorium. So from this we can understand that with a material vision, if anybody sees Shiva, he is not a very good looking person. So Daksha has all wealth, all opulences, is a very powerful and influential personality. So just because Brahma requested, he gave his daughter to Shiva. So we all know that. So he has so much of attachments to his wealth, beauty and all the other opulences that he has a lot of coverings. His intelligence is completely covered. So he was able to see Shiva only with a material vision, because of which he did not understand or failed to recognize the exalted position of Shiva despite his appearance. So these lust and envy are two kinds of enemies for your bhakti. So unless and until one overcomes this lust and envy and cultivate good culture like Vaishnava etiquettes, that is what is more important. So what we all have to understand from here is we need to purify our material vision. So it doesn't matter whom we see as Vaishnavas. Say for example, in one sense, all devotees of Shiva are also Vaishnavas. So Shiva Tattva is kind of a complicated subject, but at the same time it's easily understandable. It's not very, very complicated. So in simple terms, so any philosophy, right? So whether be it Shankara or Christianity or Islam or any other philosophy like Judaism or Vaishnavism, it should answer these 5 questions. So these 5 questions come from a very important shloka in Vedas. It's called as Artha Panchakas. So the first question, what is the nature of the soul? The second question, who is God? What is the destination? Where does he stay? And the third question, what is the means to attain him? Fourth question, what are the obstacles? And the fifth question, what do you do after attaining the destination? Any philosophy you take in this world, whether you are able to accept it or not, they will have some answer for all these 5 questions. So when the point 2 changes, who is God? What is his destination? You put Vishnu there, it's Vaishnavism. If you put Shiva, it is Shaivism. If you put the 4 Kumaras there, it's called Kaumaram. So when who is God changes, the religion changes. So this is the difference between philosophy and religion. And any religion which is not tied up to a valid philosophy is called as mental speculation. So Shiva Tattva, what Shankaracharya says, is actually Vaishnavism, is the foundation of Vaishnavism. So anybody who understands Shankaracharya's philosophy in a different way, like all the other disciples of Shankaracharya, the Mayavad disciples, they haven't studied Vedanta properly. They haven't understood Vedanta properly. So Shankara's duty was to come and isolate the Karma Kandas from Vaishnavism and to establish the foundation again and confuse them with Mayavad philosophy. So that is what Shankara's purpose was. At the same time, all the 5 questions were answered. I'm not going deep into the philosophy. All these 5 questions were answered by Shankaracharya. Just the concept of mukti was not expanded. So he had laid a very solid foundation for Ramanuja to come and establish personalism, which is Vaishnavism. So the foundations were laid, and the path of bhakti was very, very clear. People had taken the path of bhakti. So, and Shankaracharya is Lord Shiva himself. So how can Shiva not speak Vishnu Tattva? How can he not speak that? So that's the point. So he had some loopholes so that other acharyas can come and fill in. So that was the purpose. That's how we should understand. So in one way, if you see, all the Shiva devotees from this perspective, they are all Vaishnavas. So Prabhupada has given this environment for us to purify our lust and envy. So serving Vaishnavism or Krishna consciousness is actually personalism. That is how we need to understand. If there is no personalism, then we cannot purify our lust and envy. So Mayavads, if you see, mostly they are able to purify their karma or their material desires, but deep down they cannot purify their envy because they don't accept any personal form of God, any personal form of Vishnu. So that is why if you see the way Vaishnavism is structured, it's more social. The way ISKCON is structured is more social for us to interact with Vaishnavas and purify our subtle anarthas. So the lust and envy and pride, they're all like really, really subtle anarthas. So one can still be in an exalted position and still he can be an idiot. So that is the example of this particular verse. So doesn't matter what pleases Krishna. You have the material covering, whether you're a Bhakti Vedanta or a Bhakti Sarvabhauma. That doesn't attract Krishna. You put all the qualities of name, fame, wealth, opulence, everything in one person, that still doesn't attract Krishna. So what attracts Krishna? Gajendra was able to attract Krishna. He didn't have any of that intelligence. Kubja, no beauty. They were all able to attract Krishna. So we have many, many more examples in this line. So what Krishna wants is just pure love. So whether you are in a materially exalted position, and in order to cultivate that pure love, bhakti, humility is the root. So the more humble a Vaishnava is, the more love he has in his heart for Krishna. That is how we should be taking it. So this is directly proportional. It is not inversely proportional. If one says that he is humble, but only he is humble in his actions and words, but not in his thoughts, then we don't see him as a Vaishnava. That is how it is. So that is how the definition of pure bhakti is given. So it is also equal responsibility for us to, give equal respect to all the karmis, to make sure that we don't commit any namaprad or sevaprad, so that our lust and envy doesn't sprout. So this is a daily activity. It's not at all like, I have joined this Hare Krishna movement, so I'm purified, I'm trying to purify myself. I come every morning, I come to Mangala Aarti, I attend Tulsi Aarti. That doesn't matter. Your bhakti, it does not start with your intelligence. Your jnana has nothing to do with bhakti. Your sincerity has nothing to do with bhakti. This is what deep down the scripture says. Bhakti starts with when you give up your independence and ego. If Krishna is not happy, I am not happy. Anything that's putting me in distress, if it is not connected with Krishna, then it is not distress. How many of us can be like that? Anything that is putting you in distress, this is a very deep point to reflect. Anything that is putting you in distress or anything that is making you happy, if it is not connected to Krishna, it is not happiness or it is not distress. It is just some mundane rasa. And even if you have the intelligence to process that, and if you have an independent mentality to enjoy separately from Krishna, even after reading Bhagavad Gita, one can just shy away and not take any spiritual commitment. So that's not how bhakti works. Somebody can be overly enthusiastic as a neophyte, and you can say, yes, this is the knowledge. I know I am not my body, I am the soul, and this is the process. And I come and I worship Krishna like a madman every day. Of course, yes, Nectar of Devotion says that if you imitate, you will still get the taste for bhakti. But that's not what pure bhakti is called. So, Prahlad Maharaj says whatever we discussed now in a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. Manye dana bijana rupa tapa shutavyas teja prabhava bala paurusha buddhi yoga. So wealth, beauty, austerity, Srimad Bhagavatam 7.9.9. So he doesn't consider all of this even an aspect of bhakti. So this is something which we really need to reflect on. So coming back to the impersonalism. So impersonalism is kind of root cause of like the modern communism. When people don't understand the variegatedness that we have in personalism or bhakti, so that is the root of impersonalism. What is communism is doing? Like, it's just impersonalism or equating materialism. So impersonalism is as good as that. When they don't understand the different opulences or different energies of Krishna, so they equate everything. So there is absolutely no variegatedness. So what it has done to all this modern day society, it can be reflected in the way current society is functioning. People don't live in joint families anymore. And why is that? People live a lot in nuclear families. And if families come together for a longer period of time, and eventually there can be differences. So a joint family, as per Vedic culture, it nurtures a person's character. It is supposed to mold one's character even in spite of all the differences, how you put everything aside and then move on living together. So that is actually an example of Vaishnavism. So this is how all this impersonalism has penetrated into our culture, and people started having different views and started living alone. Now say for example, a kid is being given too much love by parents. Anything which is too much in this material world, which does not have a boundary, is not at all recommended. Even too much love for that matter. Even if you start giving your family or your kids too much love, that is not at all recommended, because once when they are deprived, they don't know how to live it, how to live without it, because they don't understand the higher purpose. So this is exactly what impersonalism has led us into. So what is real austerity? Real austerity is associating with Vaishnavas. So each and every Vaishnava is an instrument for us to purify our subtle anarthas, and especially pride. And that's what we are going to talk bhakti at Shiva's level today. So in order to understand, who is Shiva? So Shiva is in the topmost list of pure devotees. That is how we should understand Shiva. So if you want to define bhakti at that level, we should first understand what is not bhakti. So that is what Sanatana Goswami does in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. So if you go to Brihad Bhagavatamrita chapter 3, meeting Lord Shiva, so where Narada Muni meets Lord Shiva, so there everybody, he starts going to each and every devotee, and they go to a higher level until Sadashiv Loka. So we'll see that journey to understand what actually Sanatana Goswami is trying to communicate to us through Narada Muni's mouth. So one should also, if you see an interesting, I saw an interesting verse and purport. I think it's that Prabhupada has written the same thing, right? So how do we understand Tattva? So there is two ways of understanding Tattva, right? So if you see, Shiva performs all the difficult services what Krishna has been giving him. Say for example, he is an exalted personality, and Vishnu wants him to go and do the tough job. So nobody picks up those services. He invites all ghosts. He gives them shelter, what nobody wants, and Shiva gives them shelter. And he invites like all the demons. He gives shelter to the demons as well. He is giving boon to the demons as well. So we will see that in detail. And if you understand closely, in 8th canto, in the Churning of Milk Ocean, chapter 7, verse 22, I came across this while preparing for this class. So Prabhupada clearly writes that demigods take shelter of Shiva. When one can actually take shelter of Vishnu, why Shiva? Why, when the Churning of Milk Ocean gave a lot of poison, Vishnu directed them to Lord Shiva? So this is what we need to understand when I think even Shivain spoke yesterday about the second Namaprad, right? One should not consider the demigods like Lord Brahma or Lord Shiva to be equal to. Where does this equal to come from? The highest manifestation of Shiva is Sadashiv, and the second manifestation of Shiva is Shambhu, who does the activities inside this world on Vishnu's behalf. And the third manifestation is Rudra. Shambhu created this world, so why would he destroy? So Shiva comes again as Rudra. Let's 11 Rudras, and then he destroys. So again, see how difficult is the service. He has to impregnate, support the creation. He is technically one of the Mahajans also. And at the same time, he has to destroy everything as well. That's how tough the service is. So if you see, coming back to the offenses, one should not consider the names of demigod like Lord Brahma or Lord Shiva to be equal to. You can never say that Shambhu is actually equal to Lord Brahma. Though they have both same 55 qualities of what Krishna possesses, the degree, Brahma is a Jiva, Shiva is not a Jiva. The degree of those qualities which is in Shiva is way much higher than what Brahma is possessing. So that will be like a Namaprad. So now if we consider Sadashiv, he is in Sadashiv Loka, he is a complete spiritual being. He is beyond the causal ocean and the Viraja river. It's a spiritual world. And he lives there with his very close associates. And he can, he can even give mukti. Krishna has trusted him to bestow mukti as well. So if you consider him to be independent, right, if you consider him to be like some different personality than Krishna, that's an offense. So this is how we should understand Shiva Tattva. So now say for example, like when in that particular verse, so how would you reconcile that demigods taking shelter of Lord Shiva? So all the poison comes, and again this is the service he does. And just because Vishnu said, he drinks all the poison and he keeps it in his neck and he does not lets it go to the stomach. So what can we also infer from this? One important point is Vaishnav Ninda. When we come across criticism from Vaishnavas, right, this is the perfect example of what Lord Shiva did. That is actually like poisoning your bhakti. So somehow you come across all this criticism. So what do? You take it, you keep it in your throat. That's it. Don't process it, don't take it below, or don't take it above to your mind. Just keep it here and don't speak it out. That is exactly what Shiva did with poison. So these are the type of intricate services which Shiva performs on behalf of Vishnu or for Krishna. So the way we can reconcile this is there are like two types in Tattva. There are like two types. It's called as Apara Vichara and Tattva Vichara, like apparent consideration and absolute consideration. So that is how in this verse also there is a statement in the purport which we can reconcile. So if you say that you know the story of when Draupadi was very very thirsty, so the Pandavas went to fetch water. So Arjuna went, Bhima went, Nakula, Sahadeva, they all went and they didn't come back. And then Yudhishthir finally went. So there was like a yaksha. I think it's Dharmabhaka. So he saw that, Yudhishthir saw all of them were lying dead. And Yudhishthir asked Dharmabhaka, I want to take water. So Dharmabhaka says, you answer my questions first, and then you can go and fetch the water, and they all will come back to life as well. So I have 4 questions. So these are the 4 questions which the Dharmabhaka asks Yudhishthir Maharaj. So what is wonderful here in this material world? That's the first question. And the second question, who is happy here? And the third question, what is the way? How do we proceed in this material world? I have no clue. And the fourth question, what is the message here? What are we supposed to understand from whatever is happening around us? So these are the 4 questions which Dharmabhaka asked Yudhishthir Maharaj to answer. But Yudhishthir Maharaj gave answer only to one question. Who is happy here? So this is what he says. One who works very hard day and night and who comes back and cooks some saag, leafy vegetables. He is the most happy person. And he also uses 2 terms. Andruni, one who is indebted. Okay. And one more term is Apravasi, who lives in his own house and not in any foreign country. So now, what is the apparent consideration? If you see without any tattva, apparently what you can understand, a normal man who does not have any debt, who's living in his hometown, working from day and night in the morning, and comes back and a small meal, that makes him happy. This is the apparent consideration. This is the apara vichara. But what is the tattva vichara? What Yudhishthira Maharaj is actually answering? Who is actually indebted? Nobody is indebted. Andruni, that's what he says. Who is actually Andruni? In this world, nobody is indebted. We all have Pitruni. We must be grateful to our forefathers and our parents. Without them, we are not here. They are the cause. And then we all must be Devaruna, the demigods. We must be grateful for them to supply Indra to supply all this water and rains to make sure that this nature is functioning. Rishi Runa, Vyasadev. Who can pay the debt back to Vyasadev for water he's left us? And then the last is Bhutharuna, indebted to other animals. You're drinking milk from cow. So how can you clean this off? So this is exactly like we need to understand. So, and at the same time, Yudhishthir, if you closely contemplate on this, Yudhishthir Maharaj never said that one who is free from diseases, one who is actually doing all of this, and he can still be diseased, right? So even if he is indebted and say he is surrendered to Krishna, so who is happy? So he is saying the one, the meaning, the tattva which are what we can understand here is one who is actually in the spiritual world, who is actually liberated. So that is the innermost meaning of Yudhishthira Maharaj's answer. So this is the explanation of, in certain places in the scriptures, in the Puranas, it will be mentioned that some demigod is taking an exalted position. So rather than taking it as an apparent consideration, time, place and circumstance, we need to see it from a tattva perspective. So that is how we should actually see Shiva. So he is completely non-different from Vishnu. Sadashiva is completely non-different from Vishnu. So now we will see some of the, so say for example, Krishna, is he indebted to anybody? Sorry? So who is Krishna indebted to? Yes. So how did he fulfill his debt? So how did Krishna fulfill that debt? So he has, even though when gopis are like so chaste, they are leaving their husbands and coming in the night, or they are always thinking of Krishna. Krishna says, I have no wealth, I am completely indebted. So how did he fulfill that? So he comes down as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to give all that love back. So that is how Krishna fulfills that. So that is exactly what we need to understand. So understanding, and how did he comes? How did he come? Why did he come? Who invited him? Advaita Acharya. So Advaita Acharya, he is the cause of Mahaprabhu's descent. So understanding Sadashiva as a different personality than from Vishnu or Krishna means you are recognizing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu but not recognizing Advaita Acharya. Does this actually make sense? So this is actually the tattva. So the tattva is actually very, very simple. So we just complicate it with our different coverings. So when we actually see so when we say all the, we also discussed one point, can Shiva give Vishnu has trusted, Krishna has trusted Shiva to give mukti. It is very, very much possible. So when we see, if we worship Shiva, do we get mukti? The answer is yes and no. So there is a story of, there was a hunter called Sushwar. So every day he used to hunt for a deer and animals, and he used to take home. And that is how his family survived. So one fine day, he was hunting and he found only one deer. And that was not enough. He was crying, and on the whole night it was raining. So he was not able to take the deer back. He was not able to eat that deer. And he was sitting on top of a tree, taking shelter. And he was waiting, and that night was Ekadashi also. And he was waiting. It rained completely. He couldn't go. The family didn't eat. And he was sitting and crying there. The whole night he fasted. Indirectly. And under the tree was a Shivalinga. So he was taking the leaves of the tree, and that's a bale leaf. So he was just, Shiva was easily pleased, so he was just, without his knowledge, crying, and the leaves are offered on Shivling. So, you know what happened? Like, he got to go to Kailash after his death. And once all his karma was exhausted, he came back as a king. So this is a pastime which happens during Mahashivratri. So what we can understand is, but he didn't get mukti. He didn't get mukti here. So how we can understand worship of Shiva gives mukti? So Shiva can be worshipped when you see a Shivling. It is up to you whether you worship as Rudra or Shambhu or Sadashiv or Gopeshwar Mahadev. So if you worship Shiva in the mode of Gopeshwar Mahadev, so we'll see that pastime, then you will get mukti. So how we worship Tulsi Maharani? Tulsi can just be a plant if you see as a plant, or if you see as actual Tulsi Devi, the consort of Shaligram in Vaikunta, then it takes you to Vaikunta, bhakti for Tulsi. But if you actually see Tulsi as Vrinda Devi, Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Nama, that's what we sing every morning, then it will take you to Goloka. So it's depending on what vision you see Shiva. That is very, very important. So this is all, the Shiva Tattva which we have to understand, which can lead us to a lot of confusion. So now let's see what Shiva has to tell about his bhakti when Narada Muni goes. So Narada Muni first he goes to a Brahmana. That Brahmana, says that I don't have any love for whatever I have is not bhakti. And then he goes to, the Brahmana routes him to a king in the nearby town. So he goes to that king, and that king says, no, I don't, whatever I have is like, no, I don't have any bhakti. I don't have, what, you go to Indra. Then he goes to Indra. Indra will be like performing yajna, at the same time he'll be like resenting on something. Or Narada Muni will say, oh God, you're crying and you're performing yajna, what a bhakti. So deep is your bhakti. And then Indra says like, no, like I didn't get something from Vishnu, so that's why I'm crying and performing yajna. Then he routes him to Brahma. Brahma says, no, whatever I have is not bhakti. I still have a desire for liberation because I'm afraid of death. He lives for so long that he forgets how long he lives, and all of a sudden one day death will come. So he's afraid of death, and he says, look at Shiva. He's sitting there and he's laughing at me. He's doing kirtan every day because he knows that he's immortal. So that is what Brahma says. And then Narada Muni starts seeing down towards Kailash. And then Brahma says, no, why are you going down? There you will just find a naked man sitting on a deer skin and meditating. You go up. This is what Brahma says to Narada Muni. And he crosses all. He's a pure devotee, so he crosses all the causal ocean, the Viraja river, and he goes to Sadashiv Loka. The moment he goes there, he sees Shiva dancing in ecstasy, doing kirtan with all his consorts, and everybody is so happy. And after kirtan, Shiva goes and glorifies everybody. And then he comes and embraces Narada Muni. So these are in a nutshell, I'm not going too deep, in a nutshell, so these are Narada Muni starts, glorifying Shiva. So he first says that how great Shiva is. I think in my previous class I touched upon the story of Sudarshan Chakra. So the Sudarshan Chakra was given to Vishnu by Shiva. And this example, this story Narada Muni recites to say how great Shiva is. And after that, he gives the example of Jayadratha. So where Shiva protects him, Shiva gives a boon. And in the end, Krishna also gives his mercy because Shiva says he is my devotee. And then there is another story of Gargya, a Brahmana. He was a Grihastha but still is a Brahmachari because he was performing a lot of austerities He did not have a child. So people started making fun that he is impotent. This guy is impotent, this guy is impotent. So then he performed severe austerities and he pleased Lord Shiva. Ashutosh, he easily pleased. And he says, and who are making fun? Yadavas. So he said that I want a boon where I could kill all the Yadavas. But the boon was given, okay, you can scare them, not kill them. Similarly, what Jayadratha also asked for a boon. Like they said, no, I can't give you immortality. So Shiva gives a boon with loopholes so that Krishna can perform his Vidyaras. Okay, so these are the arguments which Narada Muni puts. So you are actually giving all the boons and you're taking them, giving loopholes so that it is not actually benefiting them. You're so clever. This was the second argument. In the third argument, Shiva tolerates offenses from Krishna devotees. So take the example of Chitraketu. When he was going in the spiritual ladder, when he saw Parvati lying on the lap of Shiva. But he was actually laughing at something else, but that offended Parvati, and she cursed him. But when he came down, Shiva was not angry. So anybody who is a Krishna devotee, and even if you offend Shiva intentionally, he doesn't get angry. So this was the third. Such a bhakti, Narada Muni is saying, you have so much of bhakti. And at one instance, Shiva goes to Vishnu, and this is the fourth story. Narada Muni is telling to Sadashiv about the pastimes of Shambhu. So that's how we understand this. So he goes and to Vishnu and says that, I want to be worshipped more than you. And hearing this, Shiva was like, did I actually do that? That is so disgusting. I said, I want to be greater than God, I want to be worshipped. But whom does actually Krishna worship? He likes his devotees more than him. So the inner meaning of this is, please make me a bhakta so that everybody can worship me. Please make me a pure devotee. And Narada Muni again glorifies. And then he again glorifies Shiva, saying that you are living an ideal Grihastha life. You and Parvati, you always discuss Krishna Katha. So that is one touching it, there is one famous story. So what happens, Parvati asks Shiva, so why do you have so much of human skull garland around you? And Shiva says, because I love you. You have died so many times. And to remember you, I am putting this garland. Then Parvati starts, okay, can you please explain? Then Shiva starts saying, talking Srimad Bhagavatam to Parvati. And he says only one condition. Okay, when I recite Srimad Bhagavatam, I go to ecstasy. So if you want me to continue reciting, then you will have to acknowledge, like this. This is what Shiva says. And Parvati agreed. And if you ever stop acknowledging, then I won't recite to you the story at all again. And that is how I have Krishna's mercy, and that is how I am immortal. Now Parvati says, I also want to be immortal, and that's how it all started. So what happens? He starts reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. Parvati starts saying, and eventually she falls asleep. And there was a parrot. And the parrot was listening to this particular story. And it was saying, And then finally it listened to everything. When Shiva opened the eyes, he saw Parvati sleeping completely. And he saw that parrot. So he took that Trishul and then he started running towards the parrot. Because now the parrot has become immortal. And he starts running towards that parrot. And then the parrot goes to Badrikashram. Vyasadeva was reciting Srimad Bhagavatam and his wife was having her mouth wide open and listening to Srimad Bhagavatam because he was talking Ras Leela. This parrot entered the mouth of Vyasadeva's wife. Who came out? Shukadeva Goswami. So this is the story. So going back, what we can understand from here is Shiva and Parvati, they are living a very, very ideal Grihastha life, taking so much of responsibilities, right? So another way in which we can understand Shiva Tattva is, so Vishnu is the source of all the current, okay? So now you have a bulb here in the material world. He does not want to associate with his energies. Okay, so how the electricity will come to bulb? Say the bulb is Parvati. He wants to impregnate the jivas. He doesn't want to do that himself. So he needs a copper wire, and that wire is Shambhu. So if you understand this, Shiva Tattva is simple. So Vishnu becomes, adulterated to a copper wire in the form of Shiva to impregnate Mother Parvati with all the jivas. So that is how the electric current comes to the bulb. So this is one real-time example with which we can perceive Shiva Tattva. We'll never get confused between Shiva and Vishnu. So Shiva, Shambhu is acting on behalf of Vishnu. So after all of this, so what we can understand, when Shiva heard all of this, so when you actually glorify a Vaishnava, so what would be the immediate reaction of a Vaishnava? He should actually take a humble position. Shiva actually starts crying with tears in his eyes. So the arguments were very, very valid. He has everything, all the opulence. At the same time, he's renounced from this world. He's not attached to anything. The first argument was talking about renunciation. And after that, he gives boons with loopholes. He's really, really clever. Because he has that intimacy with Krishna. Somewhere here and there he meets Krishna, but if you closely observe, when he fights on behalf of his devotees, right, that happens. It's not a real intimacy from heart, right? There is a reason for that. That will come in Shiva's response. And the third argument, what he gives is, you're highly influential, you're highly powerful, you can give mukti. Immortal, Shukadev Goswami. So he was a liberated soul from his mother's womb only. Can you believe that? So all these arguments were very, very valid, but Shiva cries. And you know what Shiva says? It will be very, very interesting. So what Shiva says is, what I have is actually not bhakti at all. I am the source of all the pride that is existing in all the three worlds. That is the position he puts himself in. But the way we can understand is, he is the Brahma is the personification of intelligence. Moon is the personification of mind. And Shiva is the personification of false ego. Right? And see, he has so much pride, at some time he has to start acting for that, because for protecting his own devotees. He goes there and he starts protecting his own devotees because of, he can't give up that particular independence. He's not able to give up his ego. This is the response which Shiva gives, and he starts, literally talking with tears in his eyes. And he says, Narada Muni, you are a pure devotee, whatever you are glorifying is true, because I have removed your covering. He is the personification of false ego. So without mercy of Shiva, so if you want to turn your head away from Vishnu, then Shiva will embrace you. That's the service he is doing. He covers you with his false ego. But the moment you want to turn your head to Krishna, he removes that covering. So this is how he exists in your heart, in the form of personification of pride. So he says, Narada Muni, I have removed this covering from you so that you are able to see and glorify me. So whenever someone glorifies actually in this world, it is not true. That is because they want you to actually perform that particular service. And the position we take is actually false humility. There is nothing pure here compared to what we are seeing here. There is absolutely nothing pure. What we are dealing with, the glorifications every day, the reactions that we are giving every day, there is absolutely nothing pure, 100%. So, when Shiva responds to this, what we can understand is when he wanted to be part of Ras Leela, there was one instance where he had given up his independence and ego. So he wanted to be part of Ras Leela, and he went to Purnamasya and he said, I want to be part of Ras Leela, I am the greatest devotee. Then Purnamasya said, no, you're not allowed. You still have your independence, you still have your ego. And Shiva started like banging his chest. Like, no, I have to go in, I am the greatest devotee. Then he agreed to give up his independence and ego. And then Purnamasya asked him to step into a water, and he became a small girl, Shivi. And the moment he went inside the Ras Leela, and she said, you go and hide behind the bushes, and all the Sakhis, they captured Shiva, and they were like, they started like slapping Shiva, his face, his cheek and everything became, so red. They asked like, we haven't seen you yet, who you are. Then Purnamasya comes and says, he's Shiva, he wanted to be part of Ras Leela, and he's given up all his position, identity, everything. So giving up this identity, that independence. And then Krishna gave him a boon that he can exist in Vrindavan as Gopeshwar Mahadev. So that is the exalted position of Shiva that we are talking about. So also what we have to understand here is like, no, bhakti doesn't start with jnana. We saw that. That's the mistake which Daksha is making. At the same time, when Shiva is dancing, right, like even at the level of Shiva, there is adulteration in bhakti. That is the example of Gopeshwar Mahadev which we saw. Even at the level of Shiva, the bhakti is really, really adulterated. So there is one pastime where Narada Muni goes to meet Shiva. It's actually in Kailash. Like Narada Muni performs a lot of austerities to Vishnu, and a lot of austerities to Lakshmi, and Lakshmi says, okay, give a boon, like ask for a boon, whatever boon you want I'll give. And then Narada Muni says, give me Narayan's Mahaprasad. Then Lakshmi was like, that is very difficult. Then she goes to Narayan with so much of fear. And then finally Vishnu agrees, I'm not going too much details, and he gives a handful of Mahaprasad. Then Narada Muni has that, and then he goes to Kailash after that. And he goes and says, this is what I got. Then Shiva was like, did you get something for me? No. Then Narada Muni said, no, and he was like raising his hands. Then he saw a tiny bit of Mahaprasad stuck in between his nails. And after eating that, Shiva started dancing. And all the three worlds felt the pressure. So he goes into ecstasy. So the point I'm talking about is the ecstasy. When all the three worlds, when Shiva dances, it means the destruction is about to begin. That's what Rudra is supposed to do. Now when Shiva goes in ecstasy in Kailash and he starts dancing, the whole world is collapsing. Then the presiding deity Bhuma Devi comes and begs, can you please? Then he stops dancing. So even when bhakti doesn't start with jnana as well, and bhakti doesn't start with your ecstasy as well. Every day you come, you pray, you chant, you start experiencing all the different vibrations in your body. So this is what Rupa Goswami says when he was actually worshipping with a fan, Krishna with a fan. So he started feeling all that ecstasy. He considered that as a disturbance for his bhakti. So what we are talking is pure bhakti, which is much, much elevated than what we are performing. So this is how bhakti is seen. But it only starts when you actually give up your identity and independence and start behaving that way. Gopeshwar Mahadev. So this is the mood in which we as Gaudiya Vaishnavas must understand and worship Shiva. So I'll stop here Any questions? Yes, Prabhu. Yeah. Not exactly, because the canto title says the fourth order of creation. So, what we are talking about is Shambhu. And even Parvati, Sati is involved. I think what we are talking about is Shambhu. So, that's the way we have to understand. But still, like we cannot, we saw it right, the degree of qualities which every universe has a unique Shambhu, and that's not a Jiva. He is not Supreme Personality of Godhead. At the same time, he is not a Jiva also. The degree of qualities that he has is greater than Brahma. So that's how, right, like Brahma in this purport, it's clearly said that he takes flowers offered from feet of Shiva, which is technically Mahaprasad. And we spoke about, Brahma enjoying Shiva's Mahaprasad and Shiva enjoying Narayan's Mahaprasad. So the way I am reconciling this is what we are speaking about here is Shambhu. Prabhu, is that correct? Okay. So I think it is the way I'm understanding. Definitely not Rudra, but it's Shambhu. And at the same time, it's not Sadashiv also, because we are talking about material world. The pastime is happening in the material world. Shambhu, Kailash. Kailash. So when actually Shiva starts seeing Narada Muni and having Mahaprasad, so he actually dances in Kailash. Narada Muni meets Shiva in Kailash. And the whole Mount Sumeru starts shaking. That's how it's given in the scriptures. So Shiva actually resides in Kailash. So not the Kailash we see here, it's much more, when you go to the cosmology, right, like that is it's much more higher. So we actually can't go there, from, I think from Badrika Ashram or somewhere, it's a 30 to 40 kilometer hike where it's so high, and that's kind of, there is a pathway to heaven there, which Arjuna and all the Pandavas traveled at that time. And Arjuna, while taking that pathway, Arjuna fainted because he had pride. Only pure devotees can travel in that pathway. There is absolutely no oxygen. 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers into that, you will die. So that's going from going to a different plane. So we can actually see that, from Badrikashram, I think it's 30-40 kilometers. So the way I'm able to understand this is Shiva lives actually in Kailash, and Sadashiv, and that is actually part of the universe. And Sadashiv Loka is a spiritual planet which is completely in the spiritual world. It has nothing to do with the material world. After you cross the causal ocean and the Viraja river, you have the Sadashiv Loka. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah. So, I like basically what Brihad Bhagavatamrita says is, like, Shiva can actually give mukti. If you are a sincere worshipper of Shiva, you can be one of his close associates in Sadashiv Loka. So that's the liberation. You can go up to Sadashiv Loka. But if you knowing the position of Shiva. If you worship him as Sadashiva, you'll go to Sadashiv Loka. But if you worship him as Gopeshwar Mahadev, he can take you all the way to Vrindavan. So he can take you to Goloka as well. Yes. Yes. That's basically liberation. The soul becomes, like it's not covered. The soul is always immortal, but you actually get into the spiritual world. So Sadashiv Loka is actually a spiritual world. So if you come across like any proper devotee of Shiva who sees him as Sadashiv, we don't even have to preach. That's the point. We can understand that he's in safe hands of Sadashiv and just sleep. It's as good as Vishnu Bhakti. And he will take care of that devotee to give him the journey to Vaikuntha or Goloka. Yeah. Alright. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.